Drew, how you doing?
Nice to meet you.
All right, nice to meet you.
So we're here at the Smokehouse in Trenton.
Oh yeah.
And just had some good food.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite spot. You know, I like to have the nachos, cheese, and the dip. You know, I really love those nachos.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I had some good pulled pork myself. So.
Oh yeah, they got the best food in town.
Yeah, awesome.
Smokehouse.
In fact, give them a little plug, right?
Yeah, this is water.
Cool. So I see you got a book on the table. It's your new book?
Yeah, Welcome to America. How Cultural Marxism is Destroying Our Country. And with me and Steve Martino. The co-writers of both books, you got the 37 Days. Yep. And Welcome to America, How Cultural Marxism is Destroying Our Country. So, you know, we're working on the third one. But, you know, I like to say that both of these books were #1 on Amazon in 2 different categories.
So what were the categories?
Short stories for both. One was on Marxism and culture. And the other one, this one was short stories and I believe it was something short too.
Right.
So when short stories are, I guess books are under 200 pages.
Okay.
The short stories.
They categorize.
Yeah, they categorize. So it's been a blessing. It's been it's been great. You know, as an author.
That's cool.
Speaking too.
I read in here how the first time you got up at the microphone and you just the words started just flowing and people got all excited to hear from you and how that really energized you to get to to do this even more and that there were people out there that felt like you did.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean that's the best part. Because sometimes as an activist, so I grew up. You know, I talk about the story. I was 12 years old. He was Abiona Demuri at the North Trenton Library, and he said, "Daryl, they're closing up the library." I said, "They can't close the library. What are you talking about? I'm 12 years old." You know, and then that was my first time speaking at City Council. I was 12 years old. And then I got more involved in politics from down south and St. Mary's, Georgia. And, you know, that's how all that started.
So you were originally from Georgia? Or
No, my family's from Georgia, St. Mary's, Georgia.
Okay.
Then the kind of the Great Migration, where a lot of the family members and friends moved up north. You know, some Jersey, Philadelphia, Chicago, Cleveland.
So what else do you do with yourself when you're not out, as a social warrior?
Listen, it's I've been networking, working, but also it's one of these things where I enjoy selling books. I love selling, and so it's one of these things where when you go to these places, you're selling you.
Right.
You know, I tell everybody, I love selling, and before I sold books, I was an energy guy. I was the top guy in NRG.
Okay.
You know, I was the oldest guy, and they called me the Don. I had a cigar, and I know people, I understand people, and that's one of the things that what makes me get involved in politics. I've been in politics when I was 12 years old, so I understand people's vibe. I can look at a person, what they're wearing, and you're an Eagles fan, and you're a Dallas Cow, whatever, and sell it, and sell the product. And so when I go to especially the gun shows, I go to Philadelphia, I go to the Oaks Gun Show, which is by Eagle Arms, and then the Nation's Gun Show, which is in Chantilly in Richmond. And at first I was like, I've never been to a gun show. And I go to the gun show. My first gun show was in Trevose, Eagle Arm. And I was selling 37 Days. That's when 37 Days just came out. And I made $800. Wow. And
selling the book.
Selling the book.
All right.
And so next thing I went to Oaks, and I was like, wow. I took 100 books with me and sold 99. And then I would go out to different events. And so sometimes the events, I was selling this book for like $10 at an event, and then somebody said, Daryl, you sure you want to sell it for 10? Sell it for 15. So I said, okay. 15. Next thing you know, people are giving me $20. People change. I'm saying, that's okay, $20. $20. But it's one of these things where you're learning the value of your book, the value of your product.
Yeah.
And I would never go higher than 20. You know, it just amazes me that, you know, I was telling somebody $20 for the book. But people love the books. People love short stories. You know, a lot of people, you know, like this one lady, she's a friend of mine, McNamara, she bought the Obama book. And she had my book. And Obama book is 500-600 pages. And she looked at mine and said, I think I'll read yours first. You know, the intimidation of people, you know, do they really have time to read? If you're a busy person, you gotta really have time to read 500, 600 pages, even with Welcome to America.
Besides, there's probably more truth in your book.
Yeah, oh yeah. But even like Welcome to America, you know, and Mark Levin has his book on cultural Marxism. A lot of people, you know, the attention span.
Yeah.
You know, Mark Levin has his book, I think it's like 400 or 500 pages. People say, I don't have time to read that, but I'll read yours because it's straight to the point. Me and Steve made it that the everyday person can understand. So if you had a high school diploma, you could understand what is cultural Marxism. Because you know why? Cultural Marxism, the effects of cultural Marxism are affecting the everyday people.
Right.
Most cultural Marxism books are academia.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, the everyday people are the ones that need to learn about it more than anybody,
Yeah.
because if not, they're being taken advantage of.
Oh yeah, and with this book, it's a everyday citizen, whether they're inner city, the suburb. I go to the gun shows, talk to people, moms, dads, whether they're black or white, Spanish, they're buying the book. You know, before, you know, with 37 days, you know, if you were African American or if you were someone, you know, or Spanish, really didn't want to mess with Trump book.
Right.
But maybe if you were a Trump supporter, if you were a Second Amendment guy, 37 days was the book.
Right.
You know, and because
There's a way around that.
Yeah. Because people didn't, you know, election, they really believe in election fraud and everything else. They didn't want to hear nothing about Trump.
Right.
Or the election.
I mean, you know, still today,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that the Republicans are a little shy about talking about election integrity.
Yeah.
And I guess because they think that they'll get affiliated to Trump again? Is that the...
I think a lot of them, they don't want to take the voter rolls. They don't want to clean them up. There's so you still have those individuals that are very, you know, considered rhinos, want to control, are afraid of change. You know, a lot of the Republicans, as I talk about in the book, you know, there was a lot of Republicans in Philadelphia that didn't want, first of all, they didn't want to be on the down ballot with President Trump. They didn't want to, the lawyers really wasn't fighting at the convention center like they should have. You know, so all of us were down there, we were fighting like, okay, listen, these things are happening here. What are you going to do about it? And so you had a lot of so-called rhinos, or you know, the Republicans who were go along to get along type Republicans, who were not really wanting to fight like President Trump. And a lot of us, and I was already a Republican, so I was a Tea Party guy, Republican. But there was a lot of people who signed up as a Republican just for Donald Trump.
Right.
You know, they've never voted for before. Or they were maybe voted Democrat, but they liked President Trump. And so you got an influx of people that supporting President Trump who've never been Republicans say, I'm going to be Republican this time, or I'm going to be independent.
You know, I'm walking around talking to people, and I'm finding that a lot of people don't know Robert Kennedy. They don't.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy Jr.
They don't even know that he's running for president.
Yeah.
This blows my mind.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because you know, if you look at some of Kennedy's platform and Trump's platform, there's a big overlap between the two platforms.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the Democrats don't even know Kennedy's running.
You know, when I tell a story, you know, I'm 54 years old, be 55 on September 30th. I grew up on PBS, you know, so either it was the documentaries, the Martin Luther Kings, or the Kennedys. You know, the whole glamour of the whole the civil rights movement, and then the whole glamour of the Kennedys. You know, Camelot. You know, when you see little Robert Kennedy playing under the you know, you see the Kennedys and all them playing in the field, you know, playing soccer, football, and you read about the horrific murder of John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and you see about the Kennedy family. And so, me being in politics, I studied a lot about Robert Kennedy and the whole family. And Robert Kennedy was probably my hero more than John F. Kennedy. And so when you see how Robert Kennedy is running for president now, Junior, and I'm like, wow. You know, I always wanted to maybe work for a Kennedy or you know, a campaign. But, you know, we got President Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, he says a few negative things about Trump, but not too many.
Well, they all say a negative thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's,
Except for Vivek.
yeah, Vivek. You know, you know, it's politics, it's national politics. I think that people, you know, you're going to have to challenge each other. That's how it's always that way. And when running for office, and you know, he'll pick his vice president. I don't think Vivek will. He's not even. You know, he's a lot of young people like him, but Vivek will not do well in the South. As Mitt Romney didn't do well in the South because of religion.
Okay.
That plays a major part, especially talking about Bible Belt, Alabama,
right.
Florida,
Yeah.
Georgia, Mississippi, you know, Texas.
Yeah, it's a shame that, like, you know, because the message
Mhm.
is good. You know,
Yeah.
when you listen to what he's talking about, he's pretty on point. He's well spoken.
He'll get a cabinet seat
Yeah.
if Trump wins,
Yeah.
and he will. Yeah.
Definitely.
That's what, so when people running for in the debates, they're debating, you know, basically can they get a cabinet seat if you get elected, when you get elected.
Okay.
You know, as you know, who was the doctor? I can't think of his name. Down in Maryland, Washington, African American doctor, smart as a whip.
Oh.
I can,
Yeah.
God forgive me, but they were all in the.
I can picture his face.
Yeah. Ben Carson.
Yes, there you go.
Ben Carson was in the debates, and he wound up being Secretary of Housing. So basically, you're running for a position. If you know you're not going to be president, but you know that you get a position, Secretary of State, Secretary of Housing, Secretary of Education,
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So you said you're working on the next book, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's that going to be?
It's basically, we're doing a series of Welcome to America. This Welcome to America is basically cultural Marxism, education, political correctness, the transgender movement, Solensky, all the history of Marxism and cultural Marxism and the media. The next one is basically going to be about a lot of the problems of social society.
Socialist society or
you know, the social issues that are affecting the whole thing. It's going to be on issues of the whole. So this was mainly about the culture. What are issues that are affecting us will be affecting us in the next 10 to 15 years from now, and that's important. The whole social credit score. Yeah. So you know, there's
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, artificial intelligence, AI. We're working with an individual right now with a nonprofit he has. I don't want to say his name in this group, but you know, we're working with him to talk about some of these issues for the next 20 years. What does the future hold for America? And we want to basically do the same thing where we can have it for everyday citizens. You know, the idea, okay, we could write a book and we can write something where the professors and the doctors and the top lawyers can really understand.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you're, you know,
Scholarly type book. But we decided, you know, we wanted everyday people to understand this, you know, and that's important.
I have a theory
Okay.
about the central bank digital currency. I believe that all the big companies, you know, Google, you know, Microsoft, I mean, you name it, Amazon, whatever, these multinational global companies are tired of the United States dollar being sanctioned and controlled by Congress. They want control over it directly.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to buy and sell the congressman or the president or whoever to manipulate. So I believe they want to replace the U.S. dollar as the world currency with something they can control. I used to ask Google in the morning because a buddy of mine was busting my chops. How do you know what's going on in the world every day? And I was like, I don't watch TV, I don't watch the news. I don't want to get stressed out. There's nothing I can do about it. He's like, well, how do you talk to people about stuff that's going on? And I'm like, I ask them to talk about themselves, and they're happy to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
So then I got a Google Home, and I started asking Google, hey, 5 things. And in the morning, it would give me 5 things that were happening in the news, and then I would call him up and bust his chops about what he didn't know. One morning, I get up, and Google's nothing. Talk about nothing but COVID. And I used to be able to say next if I didn't like the story. I'd say next, COVID. Didn't matter. One morning I got up and I just said, I'm going to see how many times I say next if it'll ever find anything else going on in the world besides COVID. And it was at that point that I was like, all right, something's wrong. What's going on that Google doesn't want to talk about anything but COVID?
Yeah.
There's got to be an ulterior motive. And so I started digging into, what's going on here? Why are they doing this? And then I went deep into the rabbit hole for a while because what else could you do during COVID?
Oh yeah, listen, I was watching and what was the old classics TV station? It's all the classic movies, TV shows. Every morning, I'm sitting home, can't do anything. I watch the Andy Rooney. What is the Andy Griffin show? Andy Griffin and all those old, everything with life was so nice and simple. Yeah. What was the guy with the gun? The rifleman. I was sitting in the morning watching the rifleman. Because it was the news was terrible.
Yeah.
But for me, I was always a news person, and I tell everybody this, early mornings, so sometime I get up at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. I get up 5:30 in the morning, and I watch every news, all the news cycles, every station. I'll turn on CNN, I'll turn on MSNBC, I'll turn on Fox, Newsmax, Sky News around the country, around the world. I like to know what's happening, both sides, what are they saying? Because if there's so many people that may listen just to Fox News. So half the country may know this, and the other half may not know what's happening. Even with the Tucker Carlson show about Obama, there are people who, there's probably 100 million people that didn't see the interview.
Right.
But then there's another 100 million people that seen the interview.
Yeah.
So you got millions of people who really don't know what's happening going on. And you gotta know what the enemy is thinking.
Yeah.
That's so important. Because if you don't know what the enemy is thinking,
Right.
then when the situation happens,
I used to get a
you
little
can't say you don't know.
annoyed when I would walk into a place and I would see either Fox News on or MSNBC because from the way that I would get my news was independent.
Yeah.
So I saw them both lie.
Oh, yeah.
And Fox was lying in one direction and MSNBC is lying in the other direction. And it came back to me that they're just trying to divide us and get us fighting with each other.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely listen, CNN, I'm telling you, I got, sick of CNN.
Yeah.
Breaking news. Every hour be breaking news. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
There were people that just want to get indicted, never got indicted. But, you thought that things were going to happen right there and then. And I tell people, you got to watch different news sites, online. Sky News. What are the Europeans thinking about America? What are the Germans thinking about America? What are all these other places around the world thinking about America and our policies and our president and our Congress and who we are as a country?
First exposure I had to that was a foreign exchange guy came and worked I was working at Johnson & Johnson. The guy came from Brazil. He worked here for a year and a half. He and I became good friends. I went back to visit him in Brazil during Desert Storm. Well, I got such a hard time from people in Brazil because CNN in Brazil was saying that the only reason that we were going in there was for the oil, that there were no weapons of mass destruction, and it was out in Brazil. I come back from Brazil and I put CNN on, and they're talking about weapons of mass destruction and how they treat women poorly, right? But down there, people wanted to beat me up. I mean, literally.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And I was like, listen, does your government tell you everything all the time? Does your government represent you in the way that, most of the people in America are working hard, trying to figure out how to put food on their table, get their kids to school, keep their job.
Yeah.
I said, we're no different. Our government doesn't always do what we want the government to do. And then they backed off, but.
Yeah, it's same thing, I noticed when I went around the country, certain places, there was no weapons of mass destruction. Why did George Bush go inside, these countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, 500,000 people died, over 500,000 people died. So a lot of, if you ask people around the country, around the world, what do you think of America? They would call us, probably call us terrorists.
Right.
After, after Afghanistan and Iraq, Obama, and what he did, drone men, women, and children. So some people may look at us as war criminals.
Right.
How can we go into a country and just wipe out, half a certain population of people? So, so you wonder why people around the world, they hate America. And then the news sources tell you one thing about Trump. And during the Trump election, Trump got elected, the world, they're looking down at us because we elected President Trump. But then if you look at the news sources in Europe and other places, they think totally different.
Right.
They like President Trump.
Yeah.
He's a strong guy.
Yeah.
But CNN and MSNBC is presenting themselves as President Trump as a weak individual.
I saw a documentary on Netflix, Inside the Brain of Bill Gates, I think it was called, or something close to that. If you ever get a chance, watch that documentary because it talks about what his objectives are. Cure an incurable disease. He wanted to cure malaria, but that didn't work out for him too well. I don't know if you heard, but he tried to do it down in Africa. And by the way, our pharmaceutical companies used to go to Africa and pay off the leader of the tribe and then inject the people in the tribe with the experiments. And
they've been doing that for years.
Right? Years and years and years, right? So until they changed the law that you could experiment on Americans without having any liability.
Yeah.
Right? But so Bill Gates apparently had gone there and tried to do a malaria vaccine. The side effect of the malaria vaccine apparently was that a lot of people got polio. They became more susceptible to polio. So a lot of people became sterilized from polio. So misinformation went around that Bill Gates gave people, or sterilized a bunch of people in Africa. It was the way they shot it down as being misinformation. But it was a side effect, and and whether or not it was directly related that this polio outbreak came from that or not is probably up for question. But Bill Gates isn't allowed in. These tribes figured it out. They're like, you're not allowed in anymore, buddy.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Listen. I mean, it's what the world is thinking, about us as America.
Right.
I remember the story about when Obama tried to push gay marriage and gay transgenders, LGBT in other African countries. A lot of them said no.
Yeah.
We ain't down with that.
Yeah.
We used to keep that in America.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not supporting of that, we're going to sanction you. And they sanction other countries, African countries.
Yeah, that's why they're so tired of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, our president right now is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
If you don't support, our agenda, we're going to stop giving you the money that we, the millions of dollars that we do give you to support your country. And listen, America been at this game for years.
Yeah.
I mean, we did certain things in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Brazil, South America years ago, and other countries around the world. You know, we've taken over other countries. We, you know,
even if we don't
took
take them
down
over, we
dictators.
dictate who
Yeah.
their leaders are going to be somehow.
You take down dictators.
Yeah.
You know, planes blowing up in the air. You know,
Yeah.
you know, it's so there is a
lack of trust.
Yeah, lack of trust, and there's an angle when you talk to people from around the world. You know, when they come to America, they just, you know, they think differently about us. Yeah. You know, some people ain't even with Biden. You know, up down here, people are like, oh, I love Biden. He's the greatest. You know, he's the greatest
Yeah.
since Obama or Clinton.
Yeah.
You know, but somewhere else, you know, they say, what are you talking about?
Yeah. All right, so I have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tough one.
Okay.
When you're not around anymore, how you want to be remembered?
When I'm not around anymore,
Yeah.
how do I?
When God
want to
takes
be-
you.
When God takes me, well, I
Yeah.
hope He don't take me for another 67 years. So, but if He takes, but if He takes me, you know, as a person that always fought for truth, you know, at least, you know, try to do the right thing, and this is one of the reasons why we got the books out, because, you know, you have to leave a legacy. You know, listen, you know, any person that speaks out, you know, like Martin Luther King. You know, Martin Luther King was hated in the 60s. They hated, you know, they
And now
hated.
if you read his stuff, it's so good.
Yeah, it's revolutionary.
Yeah.
Who would think there'd be a Martin Luther King holiday in 1968?
Right.
Who would think there'd be statues in 1968? You know, who would think that Muhammad Ali would be one of the greatest human beings of history? When he spoke out about the Vietnam War, he hated Muhammad Ali. So, you know, 30 years ago in Trenton, you know, there were more, you know, there was a lot of angry, hateful things said about me, and people. But now, you know, I have the books out, and there are people that really love the book and love me, and that's so important. You know, and it's about the legacy, leaving a legacy. That's all I want to do is say, okay, this, you know, small little Daryl Brooks,
Yeah.
you know, ran for Congress and have books out and you know, want to do great things, and that's what it's all about. You know, you only live once.
Yeah.
You know, you got to do great things. You just can't just be average. You know, and then wait till you die, and then no one knows who you are. You want to do great things. You know, and that's what it's all about. I mean, what you're doing now is something great with your the website. You know, people are seeing that. You know, you've got to leave some type of legacy. People know who you are. That's what it's all about. You know, knowing, you know, Martin Luther King said it best. He said that, but Martin Luther King said it best about Jesus Christ. He said, history will so shape events that Christ on the cross and Caesar on the throne. But that same Christ will rise up and split history in AD and BC. So even the life of Caesar is dated by his name. You know, so that's
Right out of your book.
Yeah. Caesar's dated by his name.
Yeah.
Caesar put Jesus Christ on the cross.
So, my boys asked me recently, and I know I said I was going to end this up, but in line with what you just said, you know, kids come to you and they say, Dad, you know, I don't know if I believe in God or, you know, something like that, you know. And I said to them, well, you know, think about this. I go, if you're born and you don't have God-given rights, then where do your rights come from? Who gives you your rights? Do you have any rights? Do your rights come from your government then? Or a big group of people who sit around and decide what your rights are going to be? I said, you know, I'll take my rights from God.
Yeah, your rights from God. I mean, you know, what the government is doing is trying to be in control of your rights.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I tell people, just don't sit around your area. Go see the world. Go see the country. Go to Alabama, Mississippi. Go to West Virginia. You know, there's so many people that think like us. If you're a patriot and you believe in God, there's so many people that believe in God and they're so excited about the world and see all the things that God created. Like, wow, the mountains, the food, and the people that enjoy freedom. And people are just the same. They want to take care of, like you said, they want to take care of their family. You know, they want to send their kids to school. You know, they want to buy a nice house, sit out in the yard and start a fire and relax.
Yeah.
You know, that's what people want to enjoy life. You know, and so that's important. You know, and so I just want to say thank you. You know, going back to Martin Luther King said about Jesus, and you look at the history of Martin Luther King, who was on the throne? J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover was the man who controlled everything. Hated Dr. King. Now who's now known as the Prince of Peace?
Right.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
We ain't nothing about J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah.
So history
Yeah.
changes when people
Yeah.
think differently. Views. Once they find out truth, once they are exposed to so many things. Yeah, you know, you see what's coming out with John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
You know, the magic bullet.
Oh, I didn't hear about that. No.
Oh yeah, the guy said he picked the magic, you know, the bullet that supposed to hit the governor, and went through John F. Kennedy and hit the governor, or the governor hit John F. Kennedy. He said the bullet was already in its. They missed John F. Kennedy, and the bullet was inside the car and on the seat, laying on the seat. So he was the one that put the bullet next to John F. Kennedy on the gurney. Yeah. So yeah. So the bullet never hit John F. Kennedy or hit the Governor Connolly. It was just landing on the seat. And so people actually thought that bullet went through John F. Kennedy and went through the governor. So history is totally, you know, what do you believe?
Yeah, there's so much. Well, that,
Didn't really go to the moon.
Oh, that's where we get flat earth. Somebody said that to me the other day. That's where we get flat earthers from, because they make everybody question everything after a point, right? All right.
I'm excited, Drew.
Thank you
for coming on.
Yeah.
Thank you for me coming on your show. I gotta invite you to come on my show.
That sounds great.
All right.